The Pinball Network is online. Launching
Pinball Innovators and Makers Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Pinball Podcast focused on the innovators and makers who are crafting homebrew, custom, and rethemed pinball machines, the technology that makes these personal projects possible, and the companies helping with these journeys. Custom pinballs are a deeply personal and technically challenging undertaking, requiring time, money, knowledge, and most importantly, the desire to make it happen. I'm Dan Rosenstein, your host. Join me, and let's go under the playfield and see what's needed to make a custom pinball possible. Hello, pinball innovators and makers. Welcome to episode 18. Today's guest has been instrumental in kicking off the growth we have seen in the custom and homebrew hobby, which has become a true catalyst for many of the pinball companies that have emerged over the last decade, and leading to the renaissance moment we have now. A pinball maker and innovator to the core, please welcome the creator of the P-ROC controller and the president and founder of Multimorphic, Gerry Stellenberg. Welcome, Gerry.
Thank you, Dan. Super happy to be here.
So, Gerry, let's start off with your, how did you get into pinball? What is your intro into it? Your origin story, if you will.
Let's see. I hadn't really touched a pinball game until college. College at Virginia Tech, 1996, 97, 95, somewhere around there. I was big into pool and playing in the pool hall. My friends were into pinball, and they sucked me in. They they got me hooked.
Do you remember what that first machine was?
It was either Theater of Magic or Attack from Mars. I forget which one. I think it was Theater of Magic. Somebody left a credit on there, said, Gerry, go play it. And I played it, and it took about 30 seconds, and I wanted to play it again.
What was it about that first experience, other than being with your friends? We'll talk about community a bunch throughout this episode. Like, what was it about playing it that drew you in while you were in college?
I think I didn't recognize or realize before I played it that it was skill-based, that you could actually control the ball. And watching my friends play, they were good at aiming and hitting shots and controlling the ball, and I just floundered around and lost the ball instantly. So I was like, wait, you're good at this and I'm not, so clearly there's something I need to learn. And it just made me, just like playing pool. You play pool against people that are better than you, and you're like, man, they can do things that I can't do. I want to learn how to do that. So I guess self-improvement.
So was this truly the very first time you had been exposed to a pinball machine, or you had never seen one growing up, or never played on one, or don't remember playing on one?
I can't remember playing one. I'm sure I saw them somewhere, but no, I don't remember playing. We used to go to the arcade and play video games, but I don't remember ever playing pinball before that.
Gerry, you mentioned you went to Virginia Tech. Are you from the East Coast originally, just regionally? Like, you don't have to give away where you're from if you don't want to.
Yeah, no worries. I grew up in Delaware, school in Virginia Tech, and then after that, made my way down to Texas.
And pinball was legal at that time, so it's not like you weren't exposed to it because it was illegal to play. So that's interesting. That college was your first foray. So how did you go from in the pool halls in between playing games, playing with your friends on Theater of Magic and Attack from Mars, to getting into the homebrew and custom scene? This is like before you started anything with P-ROC. Like, how did you foray or make your way to the custom and homebrew scene?
So basically, when I wasn't eating, playing pool or pinball, or doing anything else related to living my life, I was studying to be a computer engineer, which is kind of a combination between electrical engineering and computer software, which are the main facets of developing computer hardware, like a P-ROC board. But I'm someone who was fascinated by how things work, by creating new things, by taking ideas and twisting them around and trying to do cool new things with them. My senior project in our computer engineering class was to develop a game. We were allowed to do anything, but my partner and I chose to develop a game similar to that table labyrinth game where the X and Y table, and you'd roll a ball around and try through gates. So we developed basically that. We took opto pairs and mounted them various places around a table, moved it around, and we wrote the code for that. I think it was an assembler. It was a little microcontroller class, and that basically is pinball. And I guess I did that because of the pinball experiences and wanting to recreate that fun environment. But the ball rolling around through gates is basically the beginnings of every other project I've done for the rest of my life.
So let's talk about that labyrinth just for a sec. Did you use an existing labyrinth, or did you build up like the whole thing from scratch? Was it made out of wood, out of metal? How close to the actual game of labyrinth was it, and how far was it? What was mechanically controlled and electrically controlled?
We developed it from scratch. My project partner, just another guy from the class, he was interested in woodworking and building stuff, and he kind of took on the fabrication side of things, and I handled most of the electronics and almost all of the programming. I don't know how he got me to do all that because the class was about electronics and programming, but clearly I was a sucker. But no, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was basically from scratch completely. We cut holes. We added the I think it was more manually controlled than Labyrinth was. We would just use levers to move it around, but it would guide you through a sequence of gates instead of trying to avoid holes and get to the end. This was just a bunch of opto gates that you
Okay.
were told via LEDs which one was next, which one you had to go to.
Oh, that's super cool. So you're still if I'm understanding it correctly, you're still mechanically controlling the level and position of the board so the ball can move. It's moving through gates, and you're basically like a slalom course saying you've got to go through these gates. So instead of labyrinth, maybe it's slalom. Oh, that's super cool. So then let's rewind a little bit. You went to school for computer engineering. You found this love, you sparked this love for pinball in college. If you don't mind, let's talk about the earlier years. Like, what was Gerry like as a kid? Like, did you have the knack? Like, did you at the age of 6, did your parents know you were going to be going off to engineering school? Like, tell the listeners about that.
I don't think it was that early. No, I knew my dad brought computers home when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I remember starting on an x86 something or other that could barely do anything. I think we like everyone used them for word processing, and that was about it. I got into the bulletin board stuff, connecting to bulletin boards through the modem in early high school, I think, 13, 14. Started downloading programs and learning how to do very basic things. I took some programming classes in high school because computers were really neat and interesting, and I had dug into them a little bit. But high school. I started programming a little bit, and I just knew that I wanted to build stuff. I wanted to create stuff. I wanted to design things. I can't tell you what connected me to that, but probably Dad bringing home those computers was the start of it.
So on those early computers, so you and I, if I did my math correctly, are roughly the exact same age, based on when we both went to college. And based on just some of the things that you just said was very similar. My dad also brought home x86 computers when I was very, very young. And I remember playing Friendlyware, which was kind of like the first, like, here's everything a computer can do type piece of software. Other than word processing, do you remember any other software on those early computers that might have been interesting to you?
The only ones I remember were Sierra's King's Quest and was it Zork?
Zork, yeah.
Yeah. Look left, walk right. Was that Zork?
Yeah. Okay. No, I don't remember if look left, look right was Zork, but Zork was definitely in that time frame. That's awesome. So then fast forward, let's take you. You've studied computer engineering at Virginia Tech. You've been playing pinball with your buddies at the pool hall. So how did the bridge from playing pinball to being interested in custom and homebrew happen?
So it actually happened very quickly, and it happened before I left college. So I went to a job fair at school and talked to a bunch of companies, one of which was National Instruments, which is a company in Austin, Texas, known for test and measurement stuff. They offered me a job. I accepted it. And I started wondering, this company makes a lot of digital I/O boards and industrial control type stuff. It might be cool if I took a board from them, a digital I/O board, connected it to a pinball playfield, and wrote new software for a game. I can't tell you why I wanted to do that. I don't remember, but that was my first thought. And so I spent the second half of my senior year in college looking for a machine to basically rip apart, take out the boards and stuff. And it turned out that there was a local collector who had a Trizone machine.
Oh, wow.
That didn't have boards. He I don't know what happened to his original boards. Maybe he got the machine without them or whatever, but it didn't have boards. So it was basically just a playfield in a cabinet. And it was perfect because he gave it to me for super cheap. I think it was $25 or $50. He gave me the
Oh my
playfield.
God.
Just a bunch of features on a piece of wood that um, I had my dad who picked me up from college. We had to shove this pinball cabinet into the back of the car. He's like, "Well, what are we doing with this thing?" It takes up more room than all my stuff at the time. But took that machine with me to Austin when I moved down here and literally spent the first few months of my free time wiring up MOSFETs and creating this digital based control system for a pinball playfield. I got it completely working. Used the LabVIEW software, which, if you're unfamiliar, is a graphical programming environment that engineers. It was targeted at engineers. You didn't have to learn line-based, text-based programming. It was all graphical. You drag and drop even for loops. You drag a circle in and you'd put code inside of it, or code being icons and things that did stuff inside of it.
Yeah, it's basically control systems programming software for engineers who are great engineers, but not necessarily great software developers.
Which is weird to me because in retrospect, you still had to think the exact same way through a design. You still need variables and for loops and statements. But anyway, you do it all graphically, which was a different experience. But I had all the resources I needed because I worked at the company making the boards and making the programming environment and got a little bit of help. But in a few months, we had a fully working tri-zone pinball machine in my apartment.
Now, you said I'm going to key in on that. And you also mentioned your dad a little bit earlier. Did your dad help you with this, or did you have other people, other folks, friends that were working, or is the we kind of the royal we, but you were talking about?
The we in that case was the help I was getting from people at NI, at National Instruments, who were helping answer the stupid questions I had because I was this brand new out of school guy who didn't know anything. How do I connect this board to MOSFET gate? And why do my MOSFETs keep blowing up? I basically have no idea what I'm doing. Please help me. In other words, do it for me, but I'm going to actually be the monkey who uses his arms and hands and ties it together. But no. I got some advice. In fact, I remember posting online sometimes saying, why do my MOSFETs keep dying? And they're like, it's because you have a separate ground between your digital ground and your analog ground. And if they're not connected together, bad things happen.
You can go back and teach that to Gottlieb if you want. Like that would be good information for them.
What's funny is that specific fact has been like the driving force of a lot of conversations I've had in the last 30 years.
So other than keeping your grounds connected, what were some of the other early lessons learned?
Basically, it's a convoluted, weird way to do things, to take a pinball machine and rip apart all of its guts and rewire it and connect it to a whole new control system and tie that control system to a programming language that no one else was using to do pinball machines, and do all this before the internet was super popular. So there were avenues for help, but not real easy ways to get help. It was kind of just an exercise I didn't have any long-term goals from this exercise. It was just something I thought would fun. I did it so that I would have a pinball machine in my house that had code that I developed and could share it with my friends. And probably one or two friends played it, and then it wound up in the dumpster when I moved to the next apartment.
Oh, really? So you don't have it anymore.
No.
So in terms of gameplay code, did you have there's the portion that actually does the basics of the electrical play, so switches work and actuators work, the basics of the control system, and then on top of that there's games, there's game rules and rule set. Did you make your way into game rules and rule set and scoring, or were you basically super happy at the point that you got the foundations of the control system working?
Yeah, I wasn't really knowledgeable on pinball rule sets and why things were fun or what was fun and what wasn't fun. I was mostly attacking this as an engineer or a project to learn how to control this analog playfield with digital control circuitry. I can't tell you when I really started to understand pinball rules, but it wasn't yet. But what was next was I started to get really into playfield design and shot layouts, like probably most pinball people. I started to when I'd go out and eat, I'd take a notebook with me and start drawing layouts and different toy ideas and mechanisms. Something about just creating a fun layout or an interesting layout with fun toys was appealing to me, and that's kind of what I did in my free time.
Gerry, on this podcast, this is episode 18, and I've interviewed, so many people through it, and everybody approaches it from a completely different position. And
Okay.
you now have added the 18th position, which is starting it as an engineer, as an engineering project to see if you can do it. It's totally interesting. You mentioned that you had reached out on the early days of the internet. Would that be to rec.games.pinball, or was it to a different forum at the time? Who are you reaching out to at that point?
At that point, it was simply electronic forums because I was trying to figure out why my control circuits weren't working, or what I needed to learn. I do remember talking on RGP in college. Actually, I think you'd see a couple of posts from me being called an idiot by some of the. By some of the, I remember we had my friend had a beat the clock. He got a beat the clock during our senior year, put it in his apartment, and one of the flippers stopped working. So I had tried to do something to fix it that makes no sense. And I remember posting on RGP, hey, the flipper doesn't work on this machine. I've tried this. And the response, when I forget the guy who responded, if someone said his name, it would ring the bell because he's someone who's probably still posting today. But he basically said, stop trying to fix pinball machines. You have no idea what you're doing. Don't ever touch one again.
Well, and many people are full of bad advice, Gerry. So
I didn't listen.
Which is great. And the other great thing is that the archives still have all the communication. So it should be pretty easy to find who was it that said it. So do you remember when you first started to meet other folks who were also interested in, it probably wasn't even called homebrew and custom at that point, but into these types of endeavors that you were looking at now that you were in Austin?
I did not meet other homebrew pinball folks until we started shipping P-ROC and those kind of things. What happened was, shortly after I moved to a new apartment, got rid of that tri-zone because I didn't want to move it because it was basically just a functional but not fun to play box of pinball stuff. I bought the first two games that I'd ever played. I bought a Theater of Magic and Attack from Mars, put them in my apartment, and my friends started to come over. We'd play them at lunch every day or whatever. Went to a new job in 2001, I think. Went over to Tipping Point Technologies and met a guy who spent every weekend at his friend's house playing pinball. I was like, oh, that's cool. They had a Tales of the Arabian Nights and I think an old Star Wars game. And I went over there a couple times, played with them. And at one point, the ship bracket on my Attack from Mars broke. And this friend of mine, this guy I'd met at work, he was good with his hands. His name was Les Pitt. Anyone familiar with my long-term story knows he's been a big part of it, but he took it home and welded it and put it back in the machine. My Attack from Mars now works again. And over the course of the next so many years, we'd talk a lot, play a lot of pinball, and eventually kind of because of all of this, I started to grow my collection and then get antsy about wanting to do my own thing.
So, as you grew out your collection, was there a specific you had talked about going to bars and restaurants, or restaurants, I should say, you didn't say bars, to write down what you liked in shot layout and what you liked in various different games? Like, what did you gravitate to? Is there a specific type of game, a specific type of shot layout, a specific designer, perhaps? And when you built out your collection, what were you looking for?
I don't know that I was looking for anything in particular. I was on the ever-growing forums reading about other people's opinions. This game's great, that game's great. I didn't have a lot of opportunity to play a lot of the recommendations. Just couldn't find the games, so I bought a lot sight unseen. But I wound up with 12 machines, and I can name a few, some that I remember. Attack from Mars, Theater of Magic were the first. I bought a Medieval Madness. I bought a Shadow. Pirates of the Caribbean, Judge Dredd.
You're not dealing with a bad collection at this point. Like, it ends up they're all AAA titles.
Well, that's the thing. I was a single hardware engineer making reasonable money at the time. I didn't really have any expenses, so I started to buy pinball machines. And I bought fairly good ones. I tried to buy home use only ones because I didn't want to have to restore them. I wasn't into the woodworking side of things. I didn't want to do any of that. I eventually bought a Spider-Man Black, I think the last one or two, or supposedly the last one or two. Who knows what the dealer was actually telling me. I bought and sold a junkyard pretty quickly. Whitewater, I still have.
Yeah, it's interesting because I came into pinball through the technical track as well, but for me it was about finding ones and going through the process of repairing them, because at this point in my career although I was an engineer, I wasn't hands-on. I was managing teams, and so to kind of get that hands-on knack, it was an outlet for me on weekends while we were having our kids and building out our family, or making our family. And so the fact that you came in and you started with home use only machines, even though you came in from an engineering track, is quite interesting. So in just about, I think if I have my facts right, and if I don't, I'm sorry, in about 2008 you started pinballcontrollers.com, and it looks like I was looking at LinkedIn, and it looks like it was as a side business. You were still, at least on LinkedIn, working full-time at that. How did that come to be? Why don't you tell the story of from you start building out your collection, you talking with your friends, and then how Pinball Controllers starts?
Yeah, so it was 2006, 2007. I'd been working for Tipping Point Technologies for a while, basically in a role that they claimed was really important, in the sense that the features I was working on for the board we were designing, it's intrusion prevention system, which was new at the time, firewalls versus IPSs. IPSs were just kind of being introduced, and I was developing the chip that would scan the data as it went through the network and try to look for signatures of the bad things that they needed to filter out. So there was a lot of heat on me to work hard, design these features, get them working. And we were a small group, but I had the core function. The CEO was in my office one day saying, "What's it going to take to get this finished?" And it just kind of told me how important any individual role can be in the company. And I was in one of the more important ones at that point. And I worked my butt off, summers, nights and weekends, 16 hours a day. I'd go home and work, or I'd go home thinking about the problem I was trying to solve and solving it while showering or whatever, coming up with ideas. And I don't know how many times I would wake up in the morning having dreamt a solution to a problem that I couldn't solve or was having trouble solving. Anyway, the point was that I kind of burned out on helping other people be successful. Because at that time, at least from my perspective, other people didn't care how much work you were doing. They didn't care how much they were asking, so long as you were helping them be successful. And I don't think at most of the companies I was working throughout the years, I don't think that the individuals were taken care of nearly as well as they should have been, given the magnitude of success for the people at the top. It's kind of a philosophy I kind of hold to this day. Everyone who's helping should be taken care of. So I started looking around at what I wanted to do. I came up with some ideas. I actually quit my job after coming up with an idea to do something non-pinball related. And while working on the business plan and researching that and working through the investment raise stuff, that's kind of when I built up the collection of pinball machines. And
okay,
I didn't pursue the company. There were some big challenges that I didn't have the skills or the connections to solve. But at the time, I've now got 12 pinball machines in my house, and I'm like, this is kind of stupid. I have 12 huge, expensive things in my home that every time I turn the switch on, they're the exact same thing. But now I think I had a mobile phone at the time. We certainly had Nintendos and things that you turn them on and they have a lot of content. I think the dreams of smart refrigerators were even coming out then with apps and things that you would run on your refrigerator. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Why isn't the pinball machine a device that we can run different software applications on and do different things? And so the entrepreneur thing kind of going on while I was building this pinball game or this pinball collection, and kind of thinking that it didn't make sense. Kind of merging those two things is what led to the P-ROC board, which I developed in 2008, as you said.
And so, why don't you talk about back in 2008? What were some of the goals of the P-ROC board that you had put in place? What were some of the things you wanted to accomplish?
Yeah, so I actually the story. It's not quite the whole story. The whole story was, why am I buying individual machines? Why don't I buy or make, because there isn't? Why don't I get with my friend Les, who's good at using things, using tools and building things? Why don't we make a machine that can be themed, that can do new stuff, that can, I don't know, what if we put an LCD in the lower playfield and track the ball, and then we can have a physical ball interacting with stuff just like our finger does on these mobile phones? Why don't we try to do something that uses technology, today's technology back then, in a cool way, and integrate that with pinball? So we started down the path of P3 concepts way back when, and it was kind of a roadblock right at the beginning. Like, there's no way to control this today. There's nothing out there that I can just go buy. There is no pinball controller. Stern had their own, Williams had their own, everyone had their own. There wasn't an off-the-shelf thing with open software. There was nothing I could use. I think the only thing available at the time, if I remember correctly, was a schematic for, it was called PinMame hardware.
Yep.
Okay, so a schematic and a list of parts you could use to build this control. I don't even remember what it was really used for.
And in 2008, just to refresh for the audience, Arduinos weren't commercially available in 2008. Raspberry Pis were not commercially available. It would be another 3 to 5 years, depending on how you want to look at the timeline, that they would become commercially available. There were, even computers start, as small as the form factors we're getting, they were just starting to hit the size that they could be put into a pinball machine. And even if you did that, the ability to control digital I/O and analog I/O was still a large jump. Things started to show up at this point, especially for the, like you said, in PinMame as well as the MAME community, but it was still very, very, very nascent. So even if you could control switches and solenoids, being able to do something that had real-time control or close to real-time control that a pinball machine needs just didn't exist.
So I didn't initially jump into the controlling coils and lamps and stuff like that. What I did was, I said, okay, let me build a controller. This is what I do for a living. I design digital electronics to control stuff. So I can do this.
You can do this.
So I started designing the circuitry around controlling what eventually became our IR grid, which is the set of emitters and transmitters we put over the LCD screen to track the ball. And then I was thinking, well, how am I going to test this? How am I going to develop early software? In order to do that, I have to build the machine first, or all the features of the machine. However, I have 12 machines in my house. So why don't I build in the additional circuitry, which really is just a bunch of comparators for the switches and an output bus to talk to like a Williams or a Stern power driver board. Why don't I design this into my board so that I can use any of my 12 machines as a test bed, as a physical tool set to allow me to develop the software and make the thing more mature. So that's what I did. And that sidetracked the P3 for a good 3 or 4 or 5 years, because, as you know, the P-ROC is what that was, and it kind of grew a life of its own.
So you bring you design the P-ROC, you bring it to market, like you put it on a web page, you start to sell it. How did the community grow from there? Like, kind of talk about what happened from when the website for pinballcontrollers.com went up and you started to get not just people buying it, but people reaching out to you being like, hey, I want to do this thing.
Yeah, I think it actually started before we put the website up. That was entirely me. I designed the board. I put the website up, but while I was designing the board, I reached out on, it still might have been RGP at the time. I think it was still RGP. And I was asking people about functionality for existing machines. How does this work? Does anyone have a WPC machine? Can you explain how it handles such and such? So I could build in support for as many of the current, at the time, modern machines, support for them. I honestly don't remember how many people responded, or some of the emails I got that were, this is really cool. If you ever make this board, it'd be cool if you could make a couple extras, because I would love to have one and do this myself.
Okay, so at this point, when you were reaching out, you hadn't thought. Okay, I didn't catch that. You were just doing this as kind of like your own thing. You hadn't thought about actually building a commercial product.
Absolutely correct. Yes, this was not intended to be. I this was just a hobby thing for me to control my machine.
And so sorry, I didn't that didn't click. Okay, but when people started to say like, hey, if you build one of these, would you build a second? Like, you started to get customer signal at that point, which is a pretty strong. So how did it go from you building it for yourself to actually going, okay, I am going to make this thing to offer it to other people?
It was simply that eventually the people reaching out to me, because I think at some point I said, yeah, I'm going to build a few extras. I'm sure the history is on RGP if we actually wanted to go back and see how wrong I am in my memories. But I think a bunch more people started reaching out and saying, yep, if you do this, I want one too. Or that's really cool. I would love to control my Brida Pinbot or whatever it happened to be. I know right around... So we launched the website. I know I keep saying we, and at the time it was just me. I launched the website in 2009. Set up the LLC, and it was either before or very soon after that, I got an email from a guy named Adam Preble, who was a software programmer in Atlanta, who apparently was searching for exactly the type of thing that the P-ROC was. He was looking for a way to control a pinball machine. I think he wanted to customize I don't know if it's an Addams Family or another game, but he was looking for something, which is funny, Adam Preble and Addams Family, that makes sense. He reached out, said he's a software programmer. He really likes what I'm doing and would love to help with the software side of things. So between he and me putting this together, the board and the early software, it just kind of organically grew into this thing. We started posting it online and getting more and more emails from people who wanted it.
So when the board became available, tell me and the listener a little bit about the software that you and Adam put together. What was made available at that time?
So I had first started with a very basic set of drivers, which are just features built. I think I was using C at the time, just to make sure I could control the physical features on a pinball machine. I remember connecting it to both a Stern machine, which was Pirates, and a Williams machine, which was probably Judge Dredd, making sure that the very low-level drivers could control functions. So basically, I built a diagnostic tool set. The test menu that you have in your machines, you can activate coils, you can read switches, you can control the DMD. I did all that in C. And Adam basically asked, "Can I look at your code?" And he did. And he's like, "This isn't going to fly." So he's like, "Let me help take that code, turn it into a real C driver that we can compile into a driver, and then we can link that against real applications." And he basically helped refactor all of the driver code. He came in and he sent me one week. He sent me, "Hey, I took your driver code, I made it, and also here's an example of what I just did on my Judge Dredd machine." So he had his own Judge Dredd machine, and he's like, "Check this out," and he's like playing a basic game. I'm like, wait a second. All I did was give you some driver code. And he's like, yeah, I went and implemented a control loop and allowed you to write some very basic rules. And here's it controlling a sequence of drop targets and things. And what he had created was the core, the main logic inside of what became P-ROC game, the software framework P-ROC game.
That's absolutely amazing. So, Gerry, it must have been pretty satisfying to see your creation bring new life to both WPC and Stern machines, as well as see Adam build up the driver code in his Judge Dredd. Now, I realize you had gotten your own stuff flipping before, but seeing something that actually started to show some scale, started to show some adaptability to other people, it must have been personally rewarding.
Well, it was personally rewarding to see Adam take it and develop that stuff. The connection with the community and people obviously being successful didn't happen until a little later, because that was all based on this work. But what happened was Adam showed me that demo, and I was like, cool, how'd you do that? And he sent me the code. And it wasn't a week later that I had written all of the supporting elements of the software framework to basically turn Judge Dredd into a fully working, customized code base. So I called it JD, because it's not Judge Dredd, it's something else. But I mean, I had to build in the settings support and the high score tables and the ball trough management and all the features you would need outside of just the main control system, the main runtime loop and event handling. So it wasn't a week later, but that a full running JD was there, and Pipe-ROC game was really a thing.
And JD is not the easiest of all games. It's got that I forget what that area is that holds the balls and turns, the night zone. It's got a cool name.
Dead World.
Dead World. That's what it is. Did you get that activated as well as part of this, or
the one on my machine was actually the modified one that would hold on to the balls, and it would rotate them around, and it was pretty cool. Yes, that was fully working. The crane would go pick up the balls and drop them. It was all. I mean, truth be told, I wrote all of this code while at my day job, writing code in a VI window and then going home and testing it at night. But it took about a week of full-time work, and it was a fully running game.
So fast forward a little. That's super awesome. Fast forward a little bit to, let's start talking about how that starts to change the community and how folks start, more than Adam, start to come out of the woodwork, and what happens next from a community perspective.
So I don't really recall who was the first person to take it and do something cool with it, but this is the time where Dutch Pinball bought one. I don't know if it was Barry or Kuhn, bought one to put in their Bride of Pinbot, and that was the beginning of Bride of Pinbot 2. Scott Denisi bought one for his Earthshaker to customize Earthshaker. Eric Priepke bought one for Cactus Canyon, and that grew into Cactus Canyon Continued. There were a number of projects, people like Michael Ocean and Josh Kugler, and I'm probably missing some names of some of the early folks. David Nelson for the Buffy project. These are all people who reached out. This would have been 2010, 11, 12. I remember 2013 was the expo where we had a big booth full of all these projects, because basically all of us kind of came together and we're building these cool things, and we're all answering each other's questions, and everyone's building on top of Pipe-ROC game, and it just became this really exciting thing to show off new game code written for existing machines.
And so how in this time frame, let's rewind just a little bit before the 2013 show. How were you all communicating? Was there a forum? Were you all getting together every so often? Was everybody co-located? Talk a little bit about that, about the logistics of community building, if you will.
I'm trying to remember. We were definitely not local. Everyone lived in their own place, their own state, their own whatever. At one point, when I launched the website, pinballcontrollers.com, I put a forum on there. Pinballcontrollers.com forums. It was a simple machine forum implementation, and I'm guessing that's where we were all talking way back then. I knew that kind of grew into a bigger thing for a few years, but forum posts on that forum is since dead. We kind of all moved to Slack 5 or 6 or 10 years later, but I think it was all through online forums after the initial emails.
When was the first time that you met any of these folks in person? Do you remember? Roughly
2012, 2013.
Okay, so it was really almost either before the show or in prep, before and in prep of the show.
Absolutely. I'd only ever talked to all these people online. Yeah.
It's
I remember the first. It's 2012. I took a Judge Dredd to Expo. Was it 2012? It might have been 2011. I took I don't remember.
Gerry, we don't remember what happened a few days ago. Like, I mean, roughly it's 2011, 2012. This is a decade ago.
No, I know, but it's so important in my timeline because like 2012 was the introduction of the P3. So I would have brought Judge Dredd to Expo in 2011 before that happened. And I was sitting in Rob Anthony's booth with this custom implementation. And I remember 3 or 4 people bought P-ROCs at the show because they thought it would be super cool to customize their own games. So it would have been 2012 and 2013 where we started meeting everyone in person, seeing all their games. I mean, these 2 guys from the Netherlands literally flew over with their bride at Pinbot to participate in this custom pinball exhibit at Pinball Expo in probably 2013.
That's awesome. It's so cool to hear about the early days where you folks came together and had the first, more than just one custom machine at Expo together. So how did this all become the start of Multimorphic and the P3?
So remember that I developed the P-ROC in order to control this custom concept I had.
Right.
2012, early 2012, actually would have been late 2011, Les and I built the first version of the P3 in my garage. So straight up garage start to this whole P3 journey. We put this machine.
Gerry, if you're not going to do a startup in your garage, it's not worth doing the startup. Is what I say.
And I don't even mean my basement or my dining table. I mean my garage. We were building this machine in my garage. So we put in this very small display in the center of the playfield. We built some ramps and loops around it. 2012 was the introduction of that concept homebrew machine. We took it to Texas Pinball Festival simply to show people a cool project we were working on. And that's it. It had very early software. It did have implementations of what are now ROCs and Barnyard and some of the little mini games we had. And that was all it had. It was just, you can choose when you hit the start button, ROCs, Barnyard, or some other game. And we took it to TPF 2012. It won best something. I won $100 at that show. Took it home. And I was like, sweet, let's do this. At the same time, I had an aunt and uncle who were visiting and saw this thing. They thought it was super cool. And they're like, are you gonna make this a company? Like, no. Why would I do that? That would take literally to build a company to build pinball machines. I remember I was from the technology world, and I'd been through a couple startups that had grown to. I told them explicitly it would take $2 million to get us off the ground to build out a staff to start making. This was back in 2012, $2 million. It'd be a lot more now. But they said, we don't have $2 million, but this is super cool, and we think you should do this. So they wrote me a very small check for way less than any sane person would take to go do a company, and I started Multimorphic and regret it ever since, because it was enough money to basically pay me and Les for a year and not buy anything, just to pay our salaries for a year. And it's been more than 10 years of building something from essentially nothing.
And not only did you incubate and build the control board, but then you also built and incubated the machine itself and its core ideas, and then you built and incubated the business. Like, you truly went the maker to market journey, which is and you've been doing it for 10 years. It's absolutely amazing. What do you mind saying what your aunt and uncle's name are so we can thank them on the air?
Diane and Gary.
Well, let's thank Diane and Gary for their initial investment, because it sounds like it would not have been a company without them. Look, I will say for the listeners, I'm a P3 owner. Just for full disclosure, I've had mine for over a year. I absolutely love it. My virtual pinball machine gets the most play from me during the week. The second thing that gets play after that, and I've got a pretty extensive collection, is my P3, and I absolutely love it. And it's interesting because I work in technology. You still work in technology. It's a different form. And we're talking about technology that's now, 5 years, 10 years old. And the thing about it, I want to talk about this here rather than as we go further as the company took off. in the world of technology, that can seem like multiple generations, but I will tell you, like, as a technologist, I work on cutting edge, like bleeding edge stuff. I look at the P3 as this like revolution in innovation in pinball. Everything about it to me is the forefront of where I want pinball to go, where I see pinball going. I believe my final resistance is in manufacturing right now, or I might have actually just shipped out. And I'm super excited to get that. Like I'm a technologist. Like I truly work. Like I work on robotics. Like I work on bleeding edge stuff. And I view, even though the core technology used here might be a little, might have 10 years under it, it's still truly, it's magic in certain cases. When I show people the ball movement tracking as an example, they're blown away by it. And so walk us through how you took the prototype and that initial seed and built out the P3 that we know now, and then we'll talk about some of the games and when you took the plunge into full-time work with Multimorphic.
Well, number one, thank you for your support and for your enthusiasm for what we're doing, because we are just happy to be making something that people are really enjoying, and seeing people like you react so positively to the technology and the games is kind of the validation we need to do this. It's why we do it.
Keep them coming. I've joked that you guys have built out a great business model, and that you basically get $2,500 give or take from me every quarter, every 2 quarters. So it's
thank you. Well, we're obviously super happy to know that people out there are enjoying what we're doing. Remind me of the question. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So the plunge into Multimorphic full time, you took the seed money. How did you, over the next, talk about the next 5 to 10 years as you brought the Multimorphic out of incubation as a product to market?
Okay, so we took about 5 years to iterate on the idea. We got the first and only check from Diane and Gerry in 2012. We incorporated in May, and Les and I finished building the first prototype. We built a secondary prototype with a larger monitor. The first prototype, by the way, was a display, a 17-inch display with traditional flippers below it. We did float. We came up with a new slingshot concept. So there were floating slingshots above it. But the first prototype was 17 inches. The second prototype was 24-inch monitor. So a bigger monitor that we had to invent new flippers to float over top of it, because as we all know, monitors don't like holes drilled through them. So Les was an avid mountain biker. He came up with this concept where we would use brake lines to control flippers and tug the flippers back. Didn't work. I mean, it did work. It flipped the flippers, but they didn't want to return. They didn't have a good spring action to pull them down. So he then changed it to bicycle spokes. So hard rods that are connecting the flippers basically to the plungers. And those worked functionally. They were much better, but they would break very quickly. And we slowly iterated that design to be more structurally solid and more reliable. And at the same time, we switched from a static upper playfield design to a modular upper playfield design, because we're like, oh, I had some early parties. I had some parties, people coming over to the house, and we're playing this thing. And they're like, this is super cool. You can do so many things on the screen, but the top stuff is always the same. So I think I'm going to get bored of this lower stuff if the top stuff is always the same. And that little seed of an idea kind of got us thinking about modular upper playfields. So 2013, 2014, we had our third prototype. 2015, or I think it was before that, we brought TJ on board. TJ was a friend of Les's wife. I think they played on the same billiards league team or something. She's like, I know a mechanical engineer. He's into pinball. He works at a pinball place, and we talked to him. TJ came on board. He started designing. This might have been 2013. I forget when he came on board, but anyway, we had a mechanical engineer drawing the mechanical stuff in SolidWorks for all these things, and iterated over the course of 5 years. 2015, 2016, we had what we called a production prototype. Oh, by the way, in 2013, we thought we would be like everyone else who in the industry was coming out of the woodwork, and we announced a pre-order. we're going to have this really cool machine. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a multi-game thing. Let's get some pre-orders. And we sold right out of the chute 10 or 15 machines that we didn't deliver for like 4 years because we were still iterating the design. But we gave them all a good deal. We said, we had the whole concept. We said for, I think it was $10,000 at the time, if you pay up front, you're going to get 2 playfields and 3 mini games. You're basically going to get a lot of stuff. So those people, because they eventually got their machines, got great deals on the early P3s, because it cost way more to do that than we had charged them.
So for those of us in product development, the time scales you're talking about aren't actually that long, like 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. Like it can take that long to bring product to market. Why don't you tell, for the listener who doesn't know product development as well, what were some of the challenges you were having, and what was it that, like, if somebody was to say that was a long period of time, talk about what were the things that needed to happen in order to get the business off the ground and the product off the ground.
I think this is probably a good comparison. Might not be. You can tell me your opinion. If you took 2 guys, stuck them in a garage, and said, design a car from scratch, how long would it take? You could design the basics of it, the frame or the very basics of steering and wheel movement and braking and stuff, make it a mechanically controlled car probably in 6 months, a year, maybe. And then you'd iterate on it for another year or so and improve stuff, get better quality components and put it together. But we're talking something as complex as an automobile, but also with technology that had never been done before in pinball. So I think we could probably build any custom homebrew game in 2 years, maybe. Mm-hmm. Just 2 guys in a garage, probably 2 years, fully start to finish, fully printed, clear-coated playfields and full rules and graphics and artwork and all that stuff. But we were doing stuff that had never been done before, still hasn't been done again. Right. And we had to iterate on that repeatedly. In product development, usually you either have a very well-defined set of requirements and you can design directly to those requirements, which usually change while you're doing it anyway. But we didn't start with requirements. We kind of started with an idea, and that idea evolved as we were going. So we got far enough, and then we're like, okay, let's add the modular playfields. Okay, let's add an infinity ball trough, a ball trough that can kick up balls from any position underneath the playfield. Okay, let's add, and you name the feature that the P3 has, and we just kept adding them, and it was a long process.
You've got the built-in scoops and walls. You've got the ball tracking. You've got the playfield screen, which has to, which has its own set of challenges. And like you said earlier, you had to design new flipper mechs because, like you said, monitors typically don't like holes drilled in them. So
speaking of which, a little anecdote: we were at the 2012 Pinball Expo with our first prototype. The who's who of pinball came over and played it. Roger Sharp, Greg Kameg, Dennis Norman. So many people came over and played it, and they're like, "This is really cool, but I have one piece of advice for you." They all said the exact same thing. Use off-the-shelf components for everything. I think that sounds great, but I can't do what I want to do with off-the-shelf components. There simply aren't off-the-shelf components to do what I want to do.
Well, I mean, Gerry, you have a choice. You can use off-the-shelf flippers and mechanisms and then get a completely custom monitor, or you can use an off-the-shelf monitor and build your own custom flippers. I mean, you got to do one or the other.
So we went the route of redesigning a thing that had been reliable and working for 40, 50 years. and we eventually came to an iteration point where things were solid and stable. But for the first few years of prototypes, the flippers were a major risk.
So for the people I've interviewed on the podcast that have brought something to market, one of the things we talk about is the design for manufacturing, design for repair, service, etc. I will say, having had to do some work on the P3, because like in everything in pinball, things break, things need to get fixed. Your folks have been absolutely helpful in doing that, by the way, both TJ and Nick, as well as your direct help in a few cases. What I will say is, like, it is most definitely now today built for serviceability. It is a very easy machine to service. It's the couple things you have to learn that are different than a more traditional machine, but that's normal. Were you at this point, as you were innovating over these 5 years, also designing for manufacturability, or was that something that happened after you had your let's call it your go to market working prototype?
No, it was always part of the consideration. We knew, I mean, it was obviously we founded with money in 2012 expecting to build a product. So the reason TJ started, the reason we brought him on board was to help us take these concepts and these hand-built prototypes and turn them into a manufacturable product. Mind you, we didn't 100% understand the complexities of designing mechanical items for a pinball machine that would survive the types of things machines need to survive. But iteratively, we improved the quality, but we always intended to make it manufacturable and reliable for manufacturing. The serviceability was kind of a byproduct of the modularity. The system itself, because it's got modular playfields, and because we wanted to be able to change the flipper interface, we wanted to be able to pull out one set of flippers and put in a completely different set of flippers, which we haven't done yet. We don't do. But we made all those slide in and out. We started the whole design with the extruded aluminum side rails, kind of like an oven rack, the sides of an oven rack. So we can slide in the flippers, we can slide in the display, we can slide in the features underneath. That all kind of came out of our desire to want to change up the functionality over time. Turns out that's very serviceable.
Yeah, it's extremely serviceable. I will say on my other machines that I have, when I've got to make a fix to lift up the playfield and like work underneath the machine with the playfield on, with the potential of it coming down on my head, like it's a scary thing. Here, I pull the module out, put it on the little portable table I have, and I can just work on it there. I will also say, as an aside, a number of the documents that you folks have online and that have been passed to me, it looks like TJ had actually made some of them as manufacturing and servicing documents. So it definitely is helpful. I looked on the Discord this morning. As far as I can tell, there are 7 modules and 15 downloadable add-on games, which are a total of 22 games. Talk to me about getting that first module out the door, and then getting commercial shipments out, and then building up to the 7 modules. Including third party modules as well as licensed modules.
Yeah, so first of all, how cool is it? There's 20 plus games for this thing that we built, 20 plus experiences that people can have out of this single machine that they can buy. It's like the entire vision realized.
And some of those, and all of those experiences are physical and digital experiences, which is a really magical thing. If people have not played Michael Ocean's most recent game, they absolutely have to. It's Dungeon Door Defender. It truly should, to me at least, it put goosebumps on my back when I played it, because it really showed the power of physical and digital. Anyways, go.
And that's a $200 add-on. Every single game for the system, and I know I just put on the marketing hat for a second, the sales hat. You can buy Weird Al's Museum of Natural Rarities $3,500. It's not $10,000. You already have the system. It's just a small add-on expense for whole new experiences. But we started with the plan to launch Cannon Lagoon, Lexi Lightspeed, and Cosmic Kart Racing together, all with Barnyard and Rocks as 2 minigames at the same time. And again, we started pre-selling 2013. We didn't ship until 2017. So around the 2016 timeframe, we're like, oh crap, we can't really do all these at the same time. It's going to take us forever. So then we serialized, and we came out with Lexi Lightspeed first, which, oh, by the way, is a Dennis Nordman design. He loved the machine at Expo when he saw it, and we got him to help. So we launched with Lexi Lightspeed. I think we came out with Rocks and Barnyard and Cannon Lagoon shortly thereafter, and then it wasn't but another year or 2 later when we came out with Cosmic Kart Racing. But the release of Cosmic Kart Racing was a second full physical, really cool pinball experience on the exact same platform that people at the time could buy it for. It might have been $2,100 or $2,500. I don't remember, but it was this incremental cost to add an entirely different game. We always had the idea to do a third-party development kit. I don't actually know when we first started releasing that kit, when we first released that kit. But we came out with, well, I guess it would be Grand Slam Rally was the first third-party game developed. It was developed for the Cannon Lagoon playfield. It must have been 2017, 2018 when that came out. So clearly we had the dev kit out right around then. Friend of the company, Jimmy Lippum from 86 Pixels, wrote Grand Slam Rally. He helps us do a whole lot of things, but he also took an interest in the system itself and thought it'd be cool to write a game. Let's see, 2017, 2018 that came out. We built, was it Heist after that?
I think so.
Heist was 2020, right when COVID hit.
Mhm.
So yeah, it took us 2 years after Cosmic Kart Racing to develop our next full game kit, which was Heist. We had Steven come on as the creative director. He drove into, at the time we were down south in a manufacturing facility in South Austin. We'd talk about Heist, the concepts, the rules, and we took 2 years. We didn't have a schedule. Right? We're not like, we need this out by X date. It was when this thing is ready, when it's polished, when it's ready to go. And it came out March 2020, right before COVID hit, and that kind of shut us down. The good news is people were still buying pinball games during COVID.
Right.
The bad news is we didn't really have the opportunity to get into the manufacturing facility and build these games and ship them. So it was kind of a tough time. But regardless, throughout the early 2020s, it was a big growth period for us because we were coming out with Heist and other people were starting to develop mini games. We developed a couple more mini games of our own. We started adding features like Bluetooth support for headphones and things. We came out with the profile system where we started documenting the profile system. Lots of new features that no pinball machine had ever really supported before. And then we came out after that with our first licensed title, which was Weird Al.
And then, in terms of innovation, you've also got the head-to-head play with Cosmic Kart Racing.
Yes.
Although NBA Fast Break did have it for a serial connection between two machines, the fact that you can play this over the internet is super awesome.
Yeah, and you still can. Anyone who got Cosmic Kart Racing can right now just load up a game, host a game, or join one that's hosted by someone. I mean, our community is small enough now where usually you got to get a few friends together and coordinate and get online and do it. But yeah, you can do that today.
And there's a Discord specifically, and a Discord channel specifically for Cosmic Kart Racing matchmaking, which works just great. So can you talk a little bit about how you got the Weird Al license and what that did for the growth of Multimorphic?
Yeah, everyone knows the power of a license in the pinball market, and we were coming out with games so far that had been licensed, and the reason they were unlicensed is because we didn't have any money. We had a bunch of people. Oh, by the way, I didn't say, but a lot of our developers, in fact, all of our developers were people who saw what we were doing early on and reached out and said, "This is super cool. I want to help." Steven Silver reached out. BJ Wilson from New Zealand, he said, "This is super cool. I had similar ideas. I want to do something. I want to help." And he's written a lot of our framework software. He wrote the first version of ROCs. Rory Cernuda, we met at Pacific Pinball Expo, and I think he just graduated his game design school and wanted to help. So anyway, all these people reached out and wanted to help. We had this team of people who weren't making any money with us. I wasn't making any money. I was still working for free. I'm still basically working for free. I'm trying to make this thing successful. We all kind of shared the risk, and we will all eventually, hopefully, share some kind of reward. But all of us put this thing together. We came out with Heist and realized, I mean, it sold okay. It sold okay for us, for a new machine with a growing community of people that thought it was cool. It didn't sell like other licensed titles were selling in the industry. And we knew we were putting so much time and effort and our savings into this company that we needed to do something bigger. So Steven and I, well, the whole team kind of always throws out idea for licenses and talks through them. But I don't know if it was Steven or me who said, "Hey, what about Weird Al?" And we both thought it'd be super cool, and reached out to his agent, who sent us to his manager, and his manager was super friendly and helpful, and we decided to do it. That was just kind of pretty organic. We reached out to him. He thought it'd be cool. We had some back and forth about concepts and early on items, but we came up with the museum concept. We picked the songs. He didn't veto. He vetoed one. Well, he didn't veto one. He said there was one song on our early list that he'd rather us pick something else. But if we really wanted to, he'd let us do it. And it just kind of, super nice guy, super easy to deal with, super helpful. The problem with that one was the music licensing. The music licensing for that game required us to talk to a lot of different publishers because yes, he didn't technically have to get permission to make his music, but we absolutely had to get permission to make a game with the music that was based on many other artists' work. So it was a learning process for us, but the game is amazing. The music's amazing. Scott Denisi helped with the audio package. Michael Ocean, who's a Weird Al super fan, I reached out to him early on and said, "Hey, we have a Weird Al license." He's like, "Oh my God, I'm in."
So
very special.
So Weird Al, like many of your customers, was the reason that I ended up buying the P3. It had been on my radar for a while, and
Nice.
Look, I'm a huge Weird Al fan. That tipped the scales for me. But I will say, going back, I got the modules basically in reverse of the way that you guys designed and implemented them. And so I got Weird Al first, and then Heist showed up later. I personally actually like Heist a little bit better than Weird Al, just because of the character development in it. I like the fan layout of it. It just resonates with me. But then going back, like, I'm a huge Dennis Norman fan, and the fact that Lexi is designed by Dennis Norman, like, I will rotate those 3 games pretty regularly. And it's awesome that you got that license. And I will, like I said, the character development in both Lexi and Heist, for that matter, are really, really, really good. You've built out the company over just over a decade. You've talked about some highs, and what are some lows? What are some things that you would take as lessons learned? And if you have lessons for other people who want to go down the maker to market journey, or even the custom journey, what are some lessons you would give them?
Oh, geez. The obvious one is what I said earlier. To build a company like this, you either better commit a decade of your life to it with no pay and no free time, because this literally still is a 16-hour day job for me, almost as much for my wife Sarah, who helps on the business side of things. $2 million in 2012 would have been a good start. Today, maybe 5 million. I don't know. If you're going to go out and get investment to build a pinball company, I wouldn't do it for probably $2 million anymore. It would take a lot more. The amount of money you'll spend in prototyping and the licensing and building out a factory and doing all this stuff is significant. And if you don't have money, you're doing it with your time and effort. And hopefully you've got friends who are willing to help you, because it's just too much for 1 or 2 people. So there's the business side of things. What the challenge is to build up a business with no resources is hard for me to describe how difficult that is.
Sure.
The obvious second one is pinball machines are extremely complicated things. 2,500 unique parts, 4,000 total parts in a machine or whatever. And if one single screw falls out or isn't put in or whatever, then the feature that's holding together doesn't work, and the experience for a customer is ruined. Right? You as a new customer, you get a brand new machine. If it's missing one screw and whatever actuator doesn't move, it's like, I can't play this game. This is terrible. I hate this experience. So the challenge to create a high quality product that works for customers when they receive it is enormous. And you read all these threads about, man, I got a machine from whatever manufacturer and it's terrible. They have terrible QC because I got it and I don't know, the coil stop broke or something was wired incorrectly. And I relate that back to our own experiences. We've got customers who receive their machines, and if something doesn't work right, the P3 is new. It's different. It does things differently. So they can't even lean on their own experience with traditional pinball machines and say, oh, no worries. I have 10 other machines. I can just fix this. Usually it's like, oh my God, this is a black box to me. Let me call up Multimorphic support and tell them I can't play the game that I bought. So customer experiences related to quality are incredibly challenging, and doing that on top of a machine with no money made it extra challenging. We're at the point now where we understand how to build a quality machine, but we have people working for us, and people are humans, and humans make mistakes, and things happen, and all you can do is deal with those and move forward and try to make sure they don't happen again.
Yeah.
So
I hear you. Your analogy earlier on it being, like designing a car, I think is spot on. It's that many moving parts, they all have to work together. If one doesn't work, the whole thing doesn't work, and the experience is is goes down the gutter. And the fact that you said what you said, which is the customer experience is job one, and that's your top job is job one. I've lived that. For the things that work great straight out of the box, that was awesome. For the things that I had to reach out to your folks, you guys have been nothing but awesome in getting back to me. I feel like you were standing right there beside me, and you and Nick and TJ, like everybody who has helped, and the people on the forums as well. Ian, who's offered his free time to help, or Gamma Code, I should say. The other thing is, you talked about all this band of folks that you brought together. And a lot of them have released their own games or experiences on the P3. And I think this goes back to one of the things you said very early on in the interview, which was, when you realized that you were working for, I'm paraphrasing here, when you were working for someone else and how they weren't necessarily taking care of you and didn't care how much time you were spending. I can see that you've changed, you've brought a different culture to the way that the Multimorphic, core builds out games, builds out experiences, works together. And that's pretty awesome as well.
Thank you for recognizing it's tough, and we're still an immature company in the grand scheme of things. We still need to come out with bigger titles and build the community bigger and put out more educational material and help people do these things. So I still see us very much in the risk part of the risk reward equation. So the people that are helping us are still helping us with the hopes that one day this is going to be largely successful. And I am as well. We're still putting in all these hours because we think we could make this thing what we originally thought, which is a machine, a system that has a place in this community for the long haul.
Yeah, and with Final Resistance now coming out, you guys focusing on, as has been said in a few places, on looking at what you can do to double down even more so on some quality things, just delaying, as was in your in your letter, delaying the release of a couple modules to go look at some of those fundamentals and what you can do even better is awesome. Like, I'm rooting for you. I know there's many other people who are rooting for you. I know that there's been ups and downs. Let's take the ups and learn from the downs. And I want to see you be successful. Like I said, you've got a customer who's super happy. And everybody that I bring over and show the machine, it's like it's the machine that they want to gravitate to compared to everything else that I have in my lineup.
I love hearing that.
Yeah. So the only thing that even can hold water is my virtual pinball, but that's like it's. Yeah. Well, no, but the ability to the reason is because you can switch out titles very, very easily. But the one thing they say is it's not a mechanical pinball machine. And when they see the P3, that's when the magic light goes off. Gerry, listen, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate, how honest and raw and how you walked through the journey, how you spent the time on the journey. Thank you very much for taking the time for me and the listeners.
You bet. I appreciate what you do for the community. I love hearing everyone's story who's been on your podcast. It's great from the homebrew perspective to see all these people getting involved, and everyone's got a story. Everyone started somewhere. Everyone's doing homebrew pinball. All pinball is very difficult, and everyone who's successful at it is a successful, one, because they're a hardworking individual, and two, because a lot of people are helping them.
Yeah, I think it's very well said. Well, listen, thank you very much.
Dan, thank you.
Thanks for joining the podcast. Thanks for listening. And I can't wait to see what you make.